apparent retrogrades. At this point in time, we should now be fully aware that this narrative is brimming with ancient knowledge, waiting to be discovered and rediscovered. I said I'd save this till the end of the Noah narrative, yet with both hindsight and foresight, this is only a beginning to unlock the ancient passage of time. I found it fascinating that this narrative serves a hidden purpose of marking out apparent retrograde motions of 4 planets. As aforementioned, an apparent retrograde motion is when a planet has the appearance in the night sky to move backward and then forward again. The 4 planets whose retrograde motions have been recorded in the narrative are that of Mercury, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter. The only planet whose retrograde motions are not noted in the narrative is that of Mars. The most logical reason for this is that Mars does not have an apparent retrograde motion during the 365 days of this narrative. In my minute existence on Earth, I was somewhat ignorant, thinking that time was measured only by 3 solar system properties. First, Earth's rotation, giving us day and night. And fractions of a day measured in hours, minutes, and seconds. Second, the moon's orbit around the Earth gives us months. Fractions of months are divided by moon phases, separated by approximately 7 days. Third, Earth's orbit around the Sun gives us years. Fractions of years are the 4 seasons due to Earth's tilt. I had never considered the apparent retrograde motions of the planets as a way to track the passage of time, as demonstrated in the Noah narrative. In computer programming, we subdivide seconds into cycles per second, or hertz. We use fractions of seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, seasons, and years. Was there a reason why planetary motions became forgotten details on our solar system clock? Was it because of those who made false astrological predictions, who inadvertently made it distasteful to track the passage of time using planets? Why would the Noah narrative be marking the dates of apparent retrograde motions? The movements of our planets against the backdrop of the stars appears complex from the perspective of Earth. This is because Earth is also orbiting the Sun. Earth's orbit will at times pass or be passed by the orbits of other planets. A Google image search has multi-day time-lapse photos showing the retrograde motion of planets against the backdrop of the stars. NASA has photos of the apparent retrograde motion of Mars from Earth, as well as an apparent retrograde motion of Earth from Mars. Kepler drew a sketch of apparent retrograde motions of Mars. Kepler's drawing depicts a pattern against the backdrop of the ecliptic star constellations, as perceived from Earth. This is the pattern of Mars. What about the patterns for the rest of the planets? The narrative tracked Mercury, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter's apparent retrograde motions. On this chart, the 4 squares on the left represent patterns that these planets form over multiple years. Some loops are tight and some are spaced. It is within this apparent loop pattern that I noticed yet another important clue that got my nerd neurons firing. These patterns had the same resemblance of notches on the face of an analog clock. So let's count the loop patterns. We'll start with Venus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next, we'll look at Jupiter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now let's count Mercury. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Wait. The Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. The count of the 22 Hebrew letters is confirmed by multiple acrostic scriptures, like Psalm 119. Lamentations, and others. Mercury has an apparent retrograde pattern with 22 loops. Would these 22 loops mark out the rough boundaries for the 22-letter constellations on the Alef Tav Star Calendar system? How long does it take to complete 22 loops? The 22 loops take 7 years. Mercury has an elliptical orbit, so you will notice that the retrograde loops are not all the same size and do not have the same spacing. The 22 loops repeat after 7 years, less 7 days. For months, I had been calculating the 22 constellation regions with a mathematical formula of 365 days divided into 22 regions, which worked out to be about 16.6 days per constellation letter. At that time, I kept asking myself, why 22 letters? 22 divided by 7 is a rough estimate of pi to 2 decimal places, 3.14. Pi is the ratio of 3.14 diameters of a circle, being equal to the circumference of the same circle. Another rough estimate of pi is found in 1 Kings 7. And he made the sea of cast bronze, 10 cubits from one brim to the other. It was completely round. Its height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits measured its circumference. So then 10 cubits from brim to brim and 30 cubits circumference is pi rounded to the nearest integer or whole number. Needless to say, it was a very exciting day for me when I realized the narrative contained enough clues to link Mercury's 22 apparent retrograde loops, marking out 22 constellation letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Regions on the ecliptic that use the horizon as a transversal line to reference the alphabet shapes and meanings within the Milky Way. When working through the Noah narrative, each retrograde loop landed within the approximate calculated boundaries of 16.6 days that I had initially started this study with. Mercury's retrograde happens about 3 times a year for 7 years. My initial hope was that these loops would be constant boundary markers for the letters. However, at the end of 7 years, the pattern repeats but shifts over slightly. This pattern comes in and out of alignment. Could it be that Mercury's apparent retrograde pattern was used long ago to establish regions for this Alef Tav calendar system? There's more to this that we must address in a future chapter. The next chapter will be addressing some obvious warnings about this ancient calendar system.